Hello and welcome to Growing in Uncertainty. My name is Tess Miller, and through my seminar and coaching business Wings Unfolded, I help people who love what they're doing, but they're not sure where it's going. And I make these videos in large part to facilitate my own personal development and growth in relationship to any of the stuck places in my life where I'm feeling stuck or uncertain. And I really hope that as I work through that, these topics help you with your own places of being stuck. And in that way, I hope we can grow in uncertainty together. So, how are you? I know that's a question that we get a lot throughout our days, or at least I do. You might too if you see different people throughout your day, maybe your colleagues or friends, or maybe you get text messages from people or emails from people saying, hey, how you doing? How's it going? And I've been thinking about this question for a long time. I once had a college acquaintance who absolutely hated it when people would ask her that question because she felt like it was just, it was just kind of the random greeting that we all throw out there at everybody, and we're not necessarily expecting a genuine answer from each other. And at the same time, we still ask it. And sometimes it can make people feel a little, strange when they actually do get a real answer. But I'm wondering if part of that isn't because we're not always truthful in the way that we answer that question to ourselves. Maybe if people started internally answering, how are you, in a real honest way, maybe they would feel more inclined to answer it honestly to other people too, because other people would be used to asking themselves that question as well. I don't know. Just a thought out there. But then, I started asking myself, why is it that I usually answer that question, how are you, with something like, I'm fine, or I'm good, or I'm pretty good, whatever it is. We throw out these general statements, whether they're true or not. There have been a lot of times when I've been, really sad or mad about something, and I still say, I'm fine to somebody else. And, I started to think about that in my life and why I tend to answer that way. And sometimes it's time, if I'm getting into an elevator with somebody and I know that I just have to go one floor up and they ask, how are you? It doesn't really seem like there's going to be enough time to launch into, the saga of my life in that moment. Sometimes it's because I don't really want to talk about it, honestly, and I'm too tired. So I want to answer the other person so that I'm not being rude in ignoring their question. And at the same time, I just don't have the energy to go into it. Sometimes I don't know the person, so I don't really know how they would take it if I started sharing something personal from my life. Even personal details like I had to take my cat to the vet today, that's not a huge thing, but it still is a little bit of a personal detail that maybe not everybody would be into hearing about that. I don't know. If I know somebody, maybe I'll go into that a little bit more. Sometimes it's really unclear what people mean when they're asking that question. Do they want to know how I'm feeling, or do they want to know what I've been up to lately, what I've been doing, maybe what I did over the weekend? I don't know. So I just sometimes don't answer that question because it's unclear as to what it is the other person wants to know. But honestly, it's one of the most important questions, in my opinion, that we could be asking each other right now. there's a lot going on in the world. There are a lot of changes. We've all just gotten, well, maybe not entirely through a pandemic. We're still going through it, but we're starting to emerge back into public life, and it's kind of interesting to know how other people are dealing with that re-entrance and going back to school and taking masks off in certain situations. So, it is an important question to be asking right now. I think asking that question has the potential to really build trust and more of a sense of connection between people. And I don't know about you, but I'm really craving that right now. After spending so much time at home over 2020, it's kind of nice to know that other human beings exist out there and had their own experiences in that time. And it would be nice to feel like we could connect on that shared experience that we all had. So, however you ask or respond to the question, how are you? What I actually want to talk about today is what happens when you ask yourself that question. Because I think that question, when we have a hard time answering it within ourselves, becomes impossible to answer to anybody else in the outside world. So, when you do ask yourself, when you do check in with yourself, how am I doing? Are you throwing an I'm fine at yourself? Are you, trying to deflect that question, or maybe mask some of the feelings that you are actually feeling? And how honest are you with yourself when you ask that question? I've noticed at certain times in my life I haven't been as honest in answering that question to myself, especially during my career burnout a few years ago. I would sometimes check in with myself, or, for whatever reason, the attention would come back inward. And I definitely would say things like, I'll be fine when, and it was like the idea of being fine or things being okay was always out there. It was always on the horizon. Once I got through fill in the blank, then I could be fine. And the more I kind of punted that idea of being fine down the road, but never actually arriving at fine, the more I just got stuck in what I was feeling in career burnout. A lot of the times I didn't stop to let myself feel the truth of what I was actually experiencing in career burnout, because I was really afraid that there was not going to be a bottom to my feelings, that I would just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and get stuck in certain feelings that were really uncomfortable and unpleasant. And I also thought that if I only focused on the negative emotions, then, that's all I would feel forever and ever and ever, and people would think I was a Debbie Downer, and that would be it. And I also would come up with excuses like, well, I can't do anything about it right now, so what's the point in even trying to look at what I'm feeling like right now? That idea of this is out of my control, so I'm just not going to pay attention to it. Why bother? And, I think that not being honest with myself was a coping mechanism, definitely. It did help in some way. It protected me a little bit from having to deal with those feelings on top of dealing with everything else in my life. But it really wasn't a long-term solution. And it actually prolonged my experience of being stuck in career burnout. Not being honest with ourselves and how we're feeling is basically like trying to drive with the brakes on. you might get someplace, but you're not going to get there fast, and it certainly is going to wear you down a lot faster. We're basically preventing ourselves from knowing who we are and what we need in kind of an important moment. I've talked before about how feelings can actually be messengers, really important messengers that we can listen to and get insights into what we need and what we can do for ourselves in tough moments of being stuck. Our feelings oftentimes let us know when we're not living our lives in accordance with our values. That's when I feel like I'm really putting the brakes on in my life if I'm making choices that are not aligning with my values. So, for example, one of my values is to provide music that is uplifting, but also moving in some way to audiences. It's how I connect to other people through music. And what I was tending to do is I was tending to, during my career burnout, say yes to a lot of gigs that the music wasn't really connecting to the audience. The audience was just kind of there because, oh, it's this old war horse that, everyone should go to the orchestra to listen to this piece. And the musicians have done this piece, dozens of times throughout their careers. So it was just kind of showing up and putting the notes down and doing what we always do, but we weren't necessarily invested in, how can we engage with the audience in a little bit different way. And then on top of that, the pay for those gigs was not necessarily something that I felt really aligned with what I felt was the value of what I was doing. Or the value of what I was bringing to my work. And that can be really draining too, when you don't feel like you're, being energetically compensated for the amount of energy that you're putting towards something. So my values were not being honored in a lot of cases when I was saying yes to gigs that didn't align with those values. And it was requiring me to use up a lot more energy than I was gaining or refueling myself with. And ignoring my values continually just made my career burnout burn ever more brightly as time went on. So it was astonishing to me at first how much, when I did have the opportunity to sit down and really reflect on, oh my gosh, why am I feeling this burnt out right now? One of the most astonishing things for me was recognizing that I had not been listening to myself. I had not been honest with myself about how I was feeling for such a long time. In order for me to keep going on that track, on that path, I couldn't be honest with myself. But once I did start being honest with myself, I couldn't keep going anymore. I had to make some changes. So part of dealing with that was realizing that if I had spent this amount of time not being honest with myself, then how could I ever trust myself again? Had I really lost all that self-trust? If I'm the one that's supposed to take care of myself, but I've not been doing that for so long, what can I do? So I had to spend some time reconciling with that and doing a lot of self-care practices that demonstrated to myself that, yep, I can trust myself to make good choices about, taking care of myself and being honest with myself. And I think out of that came the realization that I have a relationship with myself. We all do. Of course, we have relationships with other people, but we also have a primary relationship with ourselves as we walk through our lives. And in any relationship, there are certain requirements, there are certain needs that relationships have. And all relationships take a little bit of work. No matter who your relationship is with, there needs to be a give and a take in a relationship. The relationship needs to feel balanced and equitable. It needs to be obvious that there's respect between the people or the parties involved. There needs to be trust, very definitely. And for me, another one of my values is that actions are just as loud as words. In other words, what we do in our lives matches with what we say we're going to do or what we say we want to do. That's a really important value for me. And, you can't just say that you're going to take care of yourself and make good decisions and choices. You have to actually make those conscious choices that reflect what you say you're going to do. And once I allowed myself the time and space to really realize that I do have a responsibility to take care of the relationship with myself, and I need to be more honest with myself and listen to my feelings. So, how is your relationship with yourself these days? Do you take care of yourself in the same way that you would a family member or a significant other or a best friend? Or is there a difference? Would you, drop everything you were doing to listen to a friend or take care of someone or help someone out, but when it comes to you needing help or needing to take some time off or deal with something, do you abandon yourself in that moment? Believe me, I've been there. I've done that too. If you're like, yeah, I do tend to do that. I think we all do in a lot of ways until we recognize what that does to us in the long run. And then we decide to, all right, I need to take care of myself. And, by the way, if you're interested or curious at all in developing some awareness about what your personal core values are, I know I've talked about that a lot in today's episode, but if you're interested in knowing what your core values are, there is a free exercise on my website, www.tess-miller.com. And you can find it there, I think, under resources, or I think there's a tab on there that says core values exercise, and you can download it, and it just explains what values are, and it gives you a very extensive list of words that represent values, and you can certainly come up with your own if your values aren't represented on that list, and then you make a list of what your values truly are and think about how you're honoring those values or not in your life. So just something to put out there. So once you can admit and accept that you haven't been honest with yourself, you can start to be honest with yourself again. So admitting it is half the battle. So the next step is to acknowledge and validate and also feel your feelings. I know, that's not really the fun part because sometimes feelings can be really jagged and uncomfortable and raw. They don't really feel good. They take up a lot of our time sometimes, but the more you allow those feelings to happen naturally, the less time it takes overall to let them happen. So just something to consider. One of the biggest fears that my clients have shared with me is that they're afraid that if they let themselves feel the full extent of their feelings, there will not be an end to feeling that way. And that's a totally understandable fear, because if you've never ever let yourself feel a feeling to the fullest extent that you can feel it, then how can you even know what's on the other side of that, right? It's like climbing up a mountain, maybe halfway, but then deciding, oh, I'm afraid of what I'm going to see in the view. I don't think I'm going to keep climbing. So you go back down, and then you never know what the view was. And that would be a big bummer, right? You do some of the hard work, but you don't get any of the view. Whereas if you continue doing the hard work, then the payoff could be remarkable. And that's what happens when we do really allow ourselves to feel the full extent of our feelings. Yeah, it's really hard work, but the payoff is inner peace, and it's inner knowing that it's not going to kill you. It's not, you're not going to get stuck there. There's actually movement once you allow the emotion to move. So you might say, but I don't have time to do all that hard work of feeling my feelings. I just don't have time for that. And that's understandable too. You know, we all have busy lives, very definitely. But what I noticed in my career burnout is that when I would say I don't have time, then I would plunge right back into my pattern of, just doing whatever I needed to do to keep doing what I was doing. And I started feeling heavier and heavier and heavier. And pretty soon it was getting harder and harder for me to get out of bed in the morning. And the longer it took me to get out of bed, then the less time I had for anything else. And then the less energy I had to not only get my stuff done in the day, but to do anything fun or energy recharging. So actually, in the long run, if you let yourself feel your feelings now, you'll have more energy to get through your to-do list, to get your work done, to, you'll have more time that way to do the things that energize you and make you feel good. So just something to consider as well. And once you're honest with how you're feeling and you let yourself feel the feelings, then what? What do you do after that? And the answer is it depends. Sometimes people realize that they need to take action on something. Oh, wow, I didn't realize that I felt resentful towards my friend for what happened. I think I should probably have a conversation with them and see if that's really what was going on, or if this is just a story I'm telling myself. That's an example. And maybe being honest with yourself helps you figure out where you haven't been honest with others in terms of your boundaries. Maybe you need to take action on communicating your boundaries to other people. Or maybe it'll make you realize that you've overstepped your boundaries with some other people in your life and you need to make amends. Or it could be that maybe the only action you need to take is an inward action. Uncovering your truth and being honest with yourself is powerful. Whether you talk about that with other people or not, the fact that you're acknowledging it within yourself can be ground moving within yourself. It can be really empowering. And it helps us feel clear about who we are and what we need. And it helps us trust ourselves again. I feel secure in knowing that I know what to do to take care of myself, and that I will make really good decisions about how to go about doing that. And that helps me build that self-trust. And it can help us feel more secure in how we are with other people too, when we're honest with ourselves. If we know that we can take care of our own needs, we might not need other people so much. We might realize that, oh, wow, I've really been relying on other people to, pick up the slack where I can't do it. And actually, now that I'm taking care of myself, I can go ahead and do it on my own. Or we might make conscious choices about who we want to talk to about our needs and our wants. You know, maybe we've been talking to people who don't necessarily help in that process. They kind of perpetuate some of the patterns we've been living with. So today I was asked no fewer than 10 times how I was, and knowing for a few days before this that this was the topic I was going to talk about, it was really interesting to notice how my answers came out, or how I thought about my answers. And my answers did change a little bit for certain people. You know, I noticed that for the people that gave me eye contact, I felt more comfortable about sharing a little more than "I'm fine." You know, I might tell them, "Oh, I had to go to the vet this morning. I had to take my cat in." But for the ones who didn't give me eye contact, I took that body language to mean that, maybe they're not in the mood to hear it right now, and that's okay. That's not about me. That's about them and what they need, and that's okay. And how about the answers that I got when I asked people how they were? I got a pretty good, a loving the weather, a lot of "I'm fines," a smattering of "I'm hanging in there." And, it just kind of ran the gamut like that, but nothing really particularly personal or specific. But maybe if I start answering the "how are you" question differently to other people in my life, maybe they'll start to answer that question differently too. But first I have to know how I answer that question on the inside. Because if I don't have that answer for myself, I'll never have it for other people. So my question for you is, how are you these days? And I know I can't hear you right now. So if you want to answer that question in the comments, or you want to send me a personal message, that would be awesome. It would mean a lot to me, and I would be honored to share that space with you of how you're doing right now. And how am I? Honestly, I'm really tired. It's been a long day. It's been a long week. It's been a long year. But I'm really, really grateful to have this time with you and to be able to share these topics with you. And that's the honest truth. So thanks for holding space for me. I hope this message resonates with you. Thank you so much for joining me whenever you do join. And I'm always so grateful for your presence and to hear any feedback that you might want to share, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever. You can find me on all of those platforms that I just mentioned. And if there's something that you want help with related to a life transition, or feeling stuck about something, or getting clarity about something, please feel free to send me a personal message. I'd love to connect with you and talk about how we might work together on that. And remember that it's okay to be stuck, but you don't have to stay there. Have an amazing week and take care.